Hello YouTube, it's me doing another Dueling Network video for all those who... Well, I felt like I would do a video of a deck profile, probably because it would probably explain a lot more about my deck, and you know, and if anyone uses this deck or knows a strategy to it that would have advice, leave that in the comment section below. If you know anything else, you want to play me while I'm on, go for it. Comment section below. Of course, greenminer13 as always is the name. Now, if you haven't noticed, there are 5 cards at the very bottom. This is a 40 card deck. I added 5 because they're my personal 5 that I added, because although you need 40, I found that this deck can also easily chain and run out of cards and very quickly. Now, be warned though, trying to do a very huge amount of these cards is not easy, but you have a 50-50 shot. I'll explain that later. Of course, we must start with our piece de resistance, the Skull Servant. You'll need 3 of him. He's the weakest monster known to mankind because he has no purpose in life but to die and be of no use to anyone but anyone. No, he just has no use. Like, I can't make that up. He was the weakest because a Thousand Eyes Idol had that ritual, and he had the fusion and blah blah blah. Alright, we have Dark Griffer. He's not a zombie, and I'm like, what you doing in this deck? Well, what he does is, what you could do is take a Skull Servant or any other dark type monster, like another Dark Griffer. Let's say you start with 2, and you could send that from your hand to the graveyard, and then send any other dark monster in your deck to the graveyard as well. So you can send 1 Skull Servant, and then from your deck another Skull Servant. Because this is like this is a great mill deck, but you're doing it to yourself. You want to get all your Skull Servant cards in the graveyard, and I'll explain what that term means. We have 2 Goblin Zombies. You can run 3, and that's up to you. You can also run Pyramid Turtle, which would do the same thing, but Goblin Zombie, in my opinion, is probably better, because what he does is, the difference between him is his activates regardless of whether or not he's destroyed by battle or not. So however you summon him, he'll get onto the field. Now, he does have a benefit of being weak, so most likely you could get any zombie with 1200 defense or less from your deck and add it to your hand, which counts for 99% of this deck. The only person who doesn't get it is Lady in White. Then we have the King of Skull Servant, the big mama jama of your level 1. Now, he is 1,000 attack for every King of Skull Servant in your graveyard and Skull Servant. Being a dark monster, he works with Dark Griffer. Being a zombie, a lot of cards work with him, actually. And he's a level 1. Who looks at that? I've played with this deck so many times. I've beaten the Egyptian god cards with him. Like, it's incredible how unfazed people are by this level 1, and then to tell him he's like one-hit KOing you and you have over 8,000 life. We have Magical Merchant, which is a great mill card. What you do is, when it flips, it's another one of those non-zombies. I should probably have, I didn't rearrange, I just hit sort and kind of move the 5 cards that I would suggest that are kind of 50-50. Magical Merchant, there were 3. I took 1 out and replaced it with Morphing Jar, because this is another great... This deck needs to be milled, and what happens when you flip him is that you go to mill and you mill out until you mill a spell or trap card, which half this deck is full of, so you've got a pretty good shot of getting one, and most of them are important, so you're pretty good on that. But what it does is, you keep milling till you get one. So you mill 2 cards, the first one's a monster, the second one's a spell, then you get the spell added to your hand. That's all it does, which is cool because, you know, you get a free spell and you've just destroyed a creature. Morphing Jar. This deck will you can easily destroy your hand within about 5 seconds, and most of the time you probably shouldn't care about what's in your hand, because it doesn't really matter what's in your hand. Just get out creatures to your grave. We have Mizuki, one of the creatures added because he's awesome. He's in every zombie deck. No zombie decks in the world don't have him, because he's great. You send him to the graveyard anyway, like Foolish Burial, Morphing Jar. He doesn't get affected by Dark Griffer, which is depressing, but you know, he's like one of the few. I mean, there's like 5 creatures in this entire deck that don't get affected by it. 2 are the bug. him, Morphing Jar, and Cyber Valley. You've got and what he does is banish him from the graveyard, banish him, and you can special summon a zombie from your graveyard, which is a great way of also getting King back out. Plague Spreader Zombie, which is cool because he can be special summoned. He's cool for synchroing. You don't need to synchro, but you know, doesn't hurt because you have you deal with a lot of weak monsters. So you have Painter, which is cool. He's a cool little guy. He's he can count as Plague Spreader Zombie, so he's technically a Plague Spreader Zombie, just not with that specific name. So if you get him out, and you know, it's weird. But what he can do is also, as Plague Spreader Zombies, that he can't be special summoned. What he can do is take up to two others level 1 or less zombies. He can turn any 2 zombies on the field with him to level 2. So if I had 2 Skull Servants, he can boost their level up 1 to make them all 3 level 2, and you can do cool stuff with the leveling editing you could do with the zombies on the field. Then we have Cyber Valley, which is a cool card. It's got 3 effects. You can have him on the field as a wall for a turn. He's cool because it's also level 1. And try to make most cards in this deck level 1, or good ways of getting cards to the graveyard. You can target 1 card, face up monster, banish him and Cyber Valley, and you can draw 2 cards instead of just draw 1 as the original effect. You can use his 3rd effect, which is what I do, is you could banish him and any 1 card in your hand, and then take 1 card and put it on top of your deck. That has most times been very beneficiary in getting effects done. Then we have Lady in White, who is a great wall, level 3, 2200 defense, and what she does is also make all level 3 and lower zombies immune to effects of spells and traps. Now listen though, they get targeted, but nothing happens. So like they can play Torrential Tribute, that would destroy everything. But something like Doomed, you know, that Doomed card that destroys 1 monster on the field, that would destroy anything but Lady in White. And then we have White Mare, whose most ability is to take banished Skull Servant or King of Skull Servants and either put him back in the graveyard or put him onto the field, which is useful for cards. And then we have 1 Spirit Reaper. That's my personal edition. I don't quite need him, but you know, it doesn't hurt to have an indestructible wall occasionally. And you know, he unfortunately, if he's on the field and Lady in White's on the field, he gets destroyed anyway because of the effects of being targeted. But what you can do is usually XYZ summon, and for level 3, that's what I usually do. But 1 Book of Life, which is pretty much Monster Reborn, but for only zombies. You remove from play 1 of your opponent's monsters, special summon a zombie. So yeah. 2 Lightning Vortex, because you have to discard a card. This is a lot like a Dark World deck, just a low-level zombies. But it's ironic because Skull Servant is it's kind of Dark World, I suppose. Monster Reincarnation, which is cool. Discard 1 card, so they discard a Skull Servant and get a King from the graveyard. Monster Reborn, always nice, never bad. 1 Mystical Space. We don't need many because most of the time you're not bound. A lot of cards don't target level 1s or lower, so usually what you mostly need are counters, not destroyers. 1 for 1, so it's half the deck has a level 1 monster. Pretty much you can discard a Skull Servant, get a King, one of those moments. Opti Camouflage Armor, which lets you get a level 1 monster and it can attack directly, which makes it high damage when King starts to really get powerful. Allure of Darkness, draw 2 cards, banish 1 dark monster. Banish King of Skull Serpents later on, discard a White Mare from your hand to the graveyard, special summon him to the field. Boom. Foolish Burial, which is a cool card. I mostly use it though for Mizuki because it's always good to have him in the graveyard. You never know when you might need him. A Bottomless Pit, a Bottomless Trap Hole, which is cool. It's nice to have, but you know, it's one of those traps that I don't need. Dimensional Prison, which is nice because you know, if you have a weak monster on the field, you don't want it to be destroyed yet. And you're trying to do something with it, then that's cool. I also like Mirror Force, same thing, except this guy gets banished. Compulsory Evacuation Device, it's an awesome effect. What it does is return 1 card from the field to the graveyard. From the field to your hand, which is cool if you want to use one of your flips, you want to save somebody from an attack, you want to stop an attack, and then call to the haunted. It special summons one monster in the face of attack position from your graveyard. It's always good to have, you know, the trap version of Monster Morton. Fiendish Chain, that's one of these 5 are now my specific choice, and I use Fiendish Chain. Negate a face of negate monster is select one effect monster, their effects are no longer activated, they can no longer attack. It's a great card. Some people, now you could use Divine Wrath, which can destroy that monster, but you know that makes their effect has to be activated. Somebody like King of Skull Servant has to activate their effect, they don't have one, so it's just better to use Fiendish Chain on it. 2 Fiend Comedian, it's awesome. It's a win-win scenario. What happens is you flip a coin, you call it. If you're right, your entire opponent has to banish or set out of play their entire graveyard. If you call wrong, you have to send cards from your deck to the graveyard. Now the cool thing about this is you get to choose what cards go from the deck to the graveyard. So you could choose every Skull Servant card related in your deck. And oh, by the way, White Mare and Lady in White, their names are counted as Skull Servants while in the graveyard. So you can have up to 12 Skull Servants technically in your graveyard, and then have 1 king on the field. You can have 11, you make him 11,000 attack, and then put Optic Camouflage, direct hit, game over. Barrel Behind the Door, which is a great counter. Most people don't run most people run Magical Cylinder, but most people don't run this, which is cool. But what this Barrel Behind does is means if they activate Magical Cylinder on a king that can one-hit KO yourself, you activate Barrel Behind the Door, and it's going back to your opponent. So they would have to either waste a second one or counter it, or, you know. And then I have Phalanax Pike, which gives 900 attack to each card it's equipped to. Let's say we equip it to a Skull Servant. He would get a 900 attack boost for every creature in either player's graveyard that has the name Skull Servant. So you could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can have 8 times 900 added. So that's over. You can have a 4,000 boost put on a level 1 Skull Servant, which is why I like that. My sideboard, these 4 Chaos Necromancer is cool, but you know, not needed. You mill a lot of your deck out, so I do run him in the sideboard in case I'm meeting somebody who, in case I want to use that. I run a lot of level 1, so a Mystic Piper wouldn't hurt to add. By the way, my sideboard are usually cards that I want to remember to keep, and I swap these out occasionally depending on how I feel. Another Painter, you know, kit out the Plague Spreader, because I like the Painter more because he's not limited and he's easier to use for the zombie synchros I like. Another Magical Merchant, like I said, you can run 3. A Book of Life. Ring of Defense, which can be very useful, is pretty much Barrel Behind the Door's alternate, is where you take that damage and just turn it into 0. Dark World Dealings, if you want to draw and discard at the same time. I prefer Lure of Darkness because you get to draw 2, and I hate how your opponent, if you're fighting a Dark World deck, playing Dark World Dealings can also be a beneficiary to them more than it'll help you. More traps, Dimensional Prison, and the Phoenix Wing Wind Blast can be discard a card, return 1 card your opponent controls to the top of their deck. Now the cool thing is about this is that you can target any card on their field. I changed out for Evacuation Device because I like how I can get my own monsters. Charity, draw 2 cards, and the attack of all my face-up monsters are less than my opponent's. You can't attack or summon anymore. Let me tell you, if you have a King of Soul Servant and max power, you've won. There's barely any creep. There's like maybe a handful of cards that could surpass his power on a bad day for them, on a good day for him. I don't know, Hidden Book of Spell, which lets you get 2 spell cards from your graveyard and shovel that back into your deck. That can be really useful. Another Fiend Comedian, like I said, you can. This is just up to you. I feel 2 is always good because I get them when I need them without being overused. Divine Wrath, which can be changed out with the chain depending on how you want to do that. Triangle Power, I ran it, but then I recently found out that it only works on normal monsters. Face-up normal monster, which is why, again, I like the Pike, because a Pike can work on anyone, and then that buffs all of them based on how many of you run. You can have a Dark Griffer in the graveyard, put it on Dark Griffer, that's a 900 boost. I mean, and the Amulet of Ambition also only works on Skull Servant. They both only work on Skull Servant, but what Amulet does is make him gain 500 times the level difference of whatever he fights. So if he fights a level 10, he gains a 4,500 attack boost. So it's not a bad thing, but you know, I prefer the Pike because you have a better chance of just getting a lot of cards from the graveyard. Do it. Most of the time, though, if I have it, I put it on Skull Servant because he's the best to gain, but you know, that's what it is. Running synchros that I'm always changing up are 2 Ally of Justice. You want to keep them less than 6 because your painters are 2, and most of the time you'll have one of these two, a level 4, but most of the time most of your creatures are less than level 3. You have like 4 monsters at level 3 and everything else is level 1. So getting them 5 or less is perfect. 6 is cutting close. So I run 2 Ally Justice Caster. I run 1 Archfiend Zombie Skull because his ability is amazing, and he actually can be pulled off quite easily if you have Painter. Armory Arm, because everything's level 1. It's very easy now to get level 4. Bionic, like I said, anything level 6. Infernity Doom Dragon is being taken out, actually. Probably replaced for something else level 6. And then, of course, Revive King, Hades. And I run, my tuners are Plague Spreader Zombies, so these two guys, I don't worry about the fact that they need that. And then I run my XYZ summon on all 3 of the level 1 XYZs, because I run a lot of level 1. You may change it up. There's a card called White, something White Attack, or something like that. It has White in the name. I know that much. It's a spell card. It lets you summon pretty much all your Skull Servants onto the field, which would be perfect for Mira. You can do that. Face-up card field would be destroyed. Detach a card. It's pretty much the level 3 wind-up thing, but with less defense. But, you know, it does prevent anything level 4 or less to be destroyed by card effects. So he also possesses Archfiend Zombie Skulls and, you know, Lady in White's effect. So he does his good Baby Tiragoon, which is cool because you can take him, little baby, and detach, put it on King, and, you know, King can now attack directly. Galaxy Queen, out of all 3, is the least used, but, you know, she can let a creature do piercing damage, which means you put it on a King who has over 8,000 attack points, and you do damage. My level 3, so it's the Leviathan and the Wind-Up. They're great stalls. The Wind-Up's a great stall. Out of the 2, I prefer Wind-Up. The 4, I have you run monsters 5 or less, or more, so don't bother with those XYZ guys. The Laval Chain, which could be good at milling or just putting something at top that you need. Utopia, because he's a very powerful level 4. Most of the time, though, these 3 you won't summon, but out of all of them, I prefer Laval, because you can send any card you want from your deck to the graveyard. Send Mizuki, Plague Spreader, any Skull Servant, anything you need. And then, or simply send a monster card and put it on top of your deck. That's good too. And out of the 3, I picked Level. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you have any comments section below, I can run my suggestion deck, which would be a deck profile of suggested cards you might want to be like cards you might want to add to your sideboard, but this is what I run most of the time. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them in the comment section below. This is greenminer13 signing off and telling you have a good day. Oh, but before I forget, Pyramid Turtle, because I know I'm going to probably get asked this, as I mentioned earlier in the video, is kind of like Goblin Zombie, but it has to be destroyed by battle. But it does, it can summon any zombie with 2,000 defense or less. And I don't run it because Lady in White still doesn't get affected. And I'm timed out from inactivity, which is perfect because I'm done here. See y'all later. Bye-bye.